A whisper in the dark, a shadow in the mist, and a village gripped by fear someone's secrets are worth killing for. Welcome to Miss Marple and the Village Whisper Murders. Picture this, a quiet evening in St. Mary Mead, where the cobblestone streets glow under the soft light of gas lamps, and the air smells of freshly baked scones from Mrs. Baker's cottage. The village is the kind of place where everyone knows everyone else's business, or so they think. But tonight, something's different. There's a chill in the air, and it's not just the autumn breeze. A whisper is spreading, a hushed rumor about a death that hasn't happened yet. That's where we begin, with Miss Jane Marple, our spinster, sitting by her fireplace, knitting needles clicking when she hears the first hint of trouble. Welcome to Miss Marple and the Village Whisper Murders, a tale of secrets, lies, and a clever old lady who sees more than anyone expects. If you love a good mystery, stick around, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more. Let's dive into St. Mary Mead, a village so quaint you'd think it was plucked from a postcard. It's the kind of place where the biggest scandal is usually who forgot to water the vicarage roses. Miss Marple, our heroine, lives in a cosy cottage on High Street, her windows overlooking the village green where children play and neighbours gossip. She's not your typical detective, no badge, no gun, just a knack for noticing the little things that others miss. Her grey hair is neatly pinned, her eyes twinkle with curiosity, and her mind is sharper than the knitting needles she's always holding. Tonight, she's sipping tea, her cat whiskers purring at her feet, when a knock at the door interrupts her quiet evening. It's young Mary, the maid from the vicarage, her face pale as moonlight. Miss Marple, she gasps, something awful's happened. They're saying someone's going to die. Now, Mary's a sweet girl, but she's prone to dramatics, so Miss Marple invites her in, pours her a cup of tea, and listens. Mary spills the story. A strange rumour's been circling St. Mary Mead all day. It started at the market, where Mrs. Price Ridley, the village's nosiest busybody, overheard two women whispering about a death coming soon. No names, no details, just a chilling promise that someone in the village won't see next week. By noon, the rumour had spread to the post office, the bakery, and even the church choir. People are scared, Miss Marple, Mary says, her hands trembling. They're calling it the Village Whisper, and no one knows who's behind it. Miss Marple leans back, her knitting needles still, and her mind starts to work. A rumour like this isn't just gossip, it's a clue, a thread in a tapestry of trouble. Let's pause for a moment. If you're new to Miss Marple, here's what makes her special. She doesn't chase clues like a bloodhound, she observes. She knows that villages like St. Mary Mead are full of secret-souled grudges, hidden loves, and jealousies that simmer beneath polite smiles. She's seen it all before, in the way Mrs. Baker's eyes linger on the postman, or how Mr. Clement, the vicar, avoids talking about his brother's disappearance years ago. So, when Mary mentions this whisper, Miss Marple doesn't dismiss it as idle talk. She asks Mary questions. Who was at the market? What exactly did Mrs. Price Ridley hear? Mary, flustered, can only recall that the women whispering were strangers, their faces hidden by scarves. Odd, Miss Marple thinks, for strangers to be in St. Mary Mead, especially ones spreading such dark tidings. Miss Marple decides to take a stroll to the village green, her shawl wrapped tightly against the evening chill. The green is quiet, but she notices small things. The way Mrs. Price Ridley's curtains twitch as she passes. The nervous glance of Mr. Hawes, the curate, as he hurries into the church. She stops by the post office, where Miss Hartnell, the postmistress, is sorting letters with a frown. Jane, Miss Hartnell says, this whisper nonsense is stirring up trouble. People are locking their doors tonight. Miss Marple nods, her eyes catching a crumpled note in the Wasterbina note with handwriting she doesn't recognize. She doesn't pick it up, not yet, but she files it away in her mind. A good detective, she knows, doesn't rush. She observes, she listens, and she waits for the pieces to fall into place. Back at her cottage, Miss Marple sits by the fire, thinking. The village whisper isn't just a rumor. It's a warning, maybe even a threat. But who's behind it, and why now? She recalls a similar incident years ago, when a rumor about stolen church funds led to a fistfight at the pub. Gossip, she knows, can be a weapon. As she sips her tea, she makes a mental list of people to watch. Mrs. Price Ridley, who hears everything. Mr. Hawes, who's been jumpy lately, and those mysterious strangers at the market. She also thinks about the vicarage, where Mary works. The vicar, Mr. Clement, has been distracted, and his wife, Griselda, has been unusually quiet. Could the whisper be tied to them? Miss Marple doesn't know yet, but she's determined to find out. Here's a tip for you mystery lovers out there. Pay attention to the small things. The way someone fidgets, the words they avoid, the glances they exchange, those are the clues. That crack a case. Try it in your own life. Notice the details, and you'll be surprised what you uncover. For now, Miss Marple's just getting started, and the village whisper is only the beginning. In the next chapter, we'll follow her as she digs deeper, visiting the vicarage and uncovering a secret that shakes St. Mary Mead to its core. What do you think the whisper's about? Drop your guesses in the comments below, and let's see who's got a detective's nose. Stay tuned for Chapter 2, and if you're enjoying this, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next in Miss Marple and the Village Whisper Murders. Welcome back to Miss Marple and the Village Whisper Murders. If you missed Chapter 1, we're in St. Mary Mead, where a chilling rumor called the Village Whisper has everyone on edge, talking about a death that's yet to come. Miss Jane Marple, our sharp-witted spinster, is already piecing together the puzzle, noticing the nervous glances and hushed conversations around the village. In this chapter, we're heading to the vicarage, where a surprising discovery pulls Miss Marple deeper into the mystery. If you're loving this suspense, smash that like button and subscribe to keep up with the story. Let's get started. The morning after Mary's visit, St. Mary Mead wakes to a grey sky, the kind that makes the village feel smaller, almost suffocating. Miss Marple, ever practical, pulls on her sturdy shoes and a warm cardigan, her knitting bag tucked under her arm. She's decided to visit the vicarage, where Mary works, to see if the village whisper has stirred up anything specific. The vicarage is a rambling old house, all ivy and creaky shutters, just across the village green from Miss Marple's cottage. As she walks, she notices the village is quieter than usual. No children playing, no neighbors chatting over fences. The whisper, it seems, has cast a shadow over St. Mary Mead, and Miss Marple can feel its weight. At the vicarage, she's greeted by Griselda Clement, the vicar's young wife, who's usually all smiles and chatter. Today, though, pale, her hands fidgeting with a dishcloth as she invites Miss Marple in. "Oh, Jane, it's good to see you," Griselda says, but her voice is tight, like she's holding something back. The vicarage parlour is cosy, with chintz, curtains, and a fire crackling. But there's tension in the air. Mr. Leonard Clement, the vicar, is at his desk, scribbling notes for Sunday's sermon, but his pen pauses when Miss Marple enters. "Miss Marple," he says, forcing a smile. What brings you here? She mentions the village whisper, keeping her tone light, as if it's just idle gossip. But she watches their reactions closely. Griselda's quick glance at her husband. Leonard's slight frown. Something's off. Miss Marple settles into a chair, accepting a cup of tea from Griselda, and starts asking gentle questions. Mary mentioned the rumor at the market, she says, about her death coming soon. Have you heard anything? Griselda hesitates, then says, Oh, it's just silly talk. People love to scare each other. But Leonard clears his throat, his fingers tapping the desk. It's unsettling, Jane, he admits. I've had parishioners asking me if it's true, as if I'd know. Miss Marple nods, her eyes catching a small detail, a letter on Leonard's desk, half hidden under a book, with the same unfamiliar handwriting she spotted in the post office wasterbin. She doesn't mention it, but her mind is racing. Could the whisper be connected to something or someone not the vicarage? As they talk, Mary bustles in with a tray of biscuits, her eyes still wide with worry. Miss Marple seizes the chance to ask her about the strangers at the market. Mary dear, she says, you mentioned those women with scarves. Did you notice anything else about them? Mary fidgets, then says one had a funny brooch shaped like a bird. I thought it was odd for a stranger to wear something so noticeable. Miss Marple files this away. A bird brooch could be a clue to identify at least one of the whisperers. She sips her tea, letting the conversation drift to village matters, but her eyes keep straying to that letter on Leonard's desk. It's not her place to pry, not yet, but she knows she'll need to see it eventually. Here's a little tip for you detective fans. When you're trying to solve a mystery, whether it's a village rumor or a puzzle in your own life, listen to what people don't say. Silence can be louder than words. Miss Marple's mastered this. She notices Griselda's quick glances at Leonard, the way he avoids mentioning the letter. She decides to nudge a little further. Leonard, she says casually, you've been so busy with the church lately. Any visitors we don't know about? Leonard stiffens, just for a moment, then laughs it off. Just the usual flock, Jane. No strangers here. But Miss Marple isn't convinced. She thanks them for the tea and promises to stop by again, her mind already planning her next move. As she leaves the vicarage, Miss Marple takes a detour through the churchyard, where the old gravestones lean like tired sentinels. She's thinking about that letter, the bird brooch, and the tension in the vicarage. The village whisper isn't just a rumor, it's stirring up secrets, and the vicarage might be at the heart of it. She spots Mr. Hawes, the curate, pruning roses near the church door. He's a nervous young man, always looking over his shoulder, and today he's even jumpier. Good morning, Mr. Hawes, she calls, noting how he flinches. Have you heard this whisper about a death? He mumbles something about idle gossip and hurries inside, leaving Miss Marple with another piece of the puzzle. Why is everyone so on edge? Back at her cottage, Miss Marple sits by her window, knitting and thinking. The vicarage is hiding something, she's sure of it. That letter, Griselda's unease, Leonard's evasiveness, they're all threads in the same tapestry. And then there's the bird brooch, a detail so specific it could lead her to the strangers who started the whisper. She decides her next step is to visit Mrs. Prisridley, the village gossip, who might know more about those mysterious women. But she need to tread carefully. Gossip can muddy the waters as much as it clears them. For now, she jots a few notes in her little book: vicarage letter, unfamiliar handwriting, bird brooch, Hawes nervous. The puzzle is taking shape, and Miss Marple's ready to pull the next thread. That's it for chapter 2, folks. The village whisper is getting louder, and Miss Marple's starting to see the cracks in St. Mary Mead's cosy facade. What's in that letter on Leonard's desk? And who are those strangers with the bird brooch? Let me know your theories in the comments. I'm dying to hear what you think. In chapter 3, we'll follow Miss Marple to Mrs. Price, where a shocking revelation about the whisperers turns the mystery upside down. If you're hooked, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next twist in Miss Marple and the Village Whisper murders. See you soon. The sun hangs low over St. Mary Mead, casting long shadows across the village green as Miss Jane Marple makes her way to Mrs. Price Ridley's grand house on the edge of the village. Her knitting bag swings gently at her side, but her mind is far from the soft click of needles. That letter on the vicar's desk, the bird brooch Mary mentioned, and Mr. Hawes's nervous behaviour, they're all pieces of a puzzle. And Miss Marple knows Mrs. Price Ridley, the village's self-appointed keeper of secrets, might hold the key to the mysterious whisperers. The air feels heavy today, as if the village whisper itself is pressing down on St. Mary Mead, urging its secrets to the surface. Miss Marple adjusts her shawl and knocks on Mrs. Price Ridley's door, ready to sift through gossip for the truth. Mrs. Price Ridley's house is a monument to her status-polished brass knocker, pristine lace curtains, and a garden so tidy it looks like it's been scolded into submission. The lady herself answers the door, her sharp eyes narrowing as she spots Miss Marple. "Jane, what brings you here?" she asks, her tone a mix of curiosity and suspicion. Miss Marple smiles, all sweetness, and says she's just stopping by for a chat about the village's latest nonsense, the whisper about a coming death. Mrs. Price Ridley's face lights up. Nothing delights her more than a juicy bit of gossip. She ushers Miss Marple into her parlour, a room stuffed with overstuffed chairs and enough doilies to blanket the village. Over tea and slightly stale biscuits, Miss Marple steers the conversation to the market, where the whisper began. "Oh, those women," Mrs. Price Ridley says, leaning forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial hiss. "I saw them myself, Jane, at the market stalls. 2 of them, scarves over their faces like they didn't want to be recognized. One had a brooch silver bird, very distinctive. They were whispering by the apple cart, and I heard one say, 'It'll happen soon, before the week's out.' I couldn't catch more, but it gave me chills." Miss Marple nods, her face calm but her mind racing. A bird brooch, just as Mary described, and a timeline before the week's out. She asks, gently, if Mrs. Price Ridley noticed anything else about the women, their voices, their clothes, anything. Mrs. Price Ridley puffs up, proud to be the centre of attention. One had a posh accent, like she wasn't from around here. The other, well, she seemed nervous, kept looking around. They left in a hurry when they saw me watching. This is gold for Miss Marple. A posh accent suggests someone from outside St. Mary Mead, maybe from London or a nearby town. The nervous one, though, that could be a local, someone hiding their face to avoid recognition. She presses Mrs. Price Ridley for more, asking if she's seen anyone in the village acting oddly since the whisper started. Mrs. Price Ridley doesn't disappoint. "Well," she says, lowering her voice, "there's Mr. Hawes, the curate. He's been skulking about, avoiding everyone. And yesterday I saw him at the post office, posting a letter in a terrible rush. Looked like he didn't want anyone to see it." Miss Marple's eyes flicker. Another letter, possibly tied to the one she spotted at the vicarage. The threads are starting to weave together, but the pattern's still unclear. Let's take a moment to think like Miss Marple. When you're unraveling a mystery, it's not just about what you hear, it's about who's saying it and why. Mrs. Price Ridley loves to talk, but she also loves to embellish. Miss Marple knows to take her stories with a pinch of salt, but the bird brooch and the posh accent feel solid, like clues she can grip onto. She thanks Mrs. Price Ridley, promising to keep her posted, and steps back into the village, her mind buzzing. The whisperers are real, and one of them might not be a stranger at all. Could the nervous one be someone from St. Mary Mead, hiding behind a scarf? And what about Mr. Hawes and his mysterious letter? She decides to visit the post office next, to see if Miss Hartnell, the postmistress, can shed light on these letters that keep popping up. As she walks, Miss Marple notices the village is still unnaturally quiet. A few curtains twitch as she passes, and she spots young Tommy, the baker's boy, lingering by the church gate, looking anxious. She stops to chat, her voice warm and grandmotherly. "Tommy, you look troubled. Is it this whisper nonsense?" Tommy shuffles his feet, then blurts out, "Miss Marple, I heard something last night, near the church. Voices, late, after midnight. I couldn't see who, but they sounded angry." Miss Marple's heart quickens. Angry voices in the churchyard, after midnight. That's no ordinary village gossip. She thanks Tommy, slipping him a peppermint from her bag, and makes a mental note to check the churchyard later. For now, the post office is her goal. At the post office, Miss Hartnell is behind the counter, her glasses perched on her nose as she sorts mail. She's less excitable than Mrs. Price Ridley, but just as observant in her own way. Miss Marple mentions the whisper casually and asks if any unusual letters have come through. Miss Hartnell frowns. "Funny you should ask, Jane. Yesterday, Mr. Hawes dropped off a letter, no return address, and he was in such a state I thought he'd faint. And there's been another one, same handwriting, delivered to the vicarage this morning." Miss Marple's pulse quickens. 2 letters, same handwriting, one tied to the nervous curate, one to the vicarage. She asks to see the waste bin, remembering the crumpled note from her last visit. Miss Hartnell, puzzled, hands it over. And there it is, a scrap of paper with that same unfamiliar script, torn but legible. Before the week's out, it ends. A chill runs down Miss Marple's spine. This isn't just a plan. Back at her cottage, Miss Marple sits by the fire, her knitting untouched. The village whisper is no idle threat. It's a promise, tied to letters and strangers and a village full of secrets. The bird brooch, the posh accent, Mr. Hawes's letter, the voices in the churchyard, they're all connected, and she's determined to find out how. Her next move is clear. She needs to talk to Mr. Hawes to see why he's so jumpy and what his letter was about. But she need to be careful, he's already skittish, and pushing too hard could make him clam up. For now, she adds to her little book, bird brooch, posh accent, nervous companion, Hawes's letter, no return address, churchyard voices. The tapestry is growing, and Miss Marple's ready to tug another thread. That's chapter 3, mystery fans. The village whisper is turning into something far darker, and Miss Marple's closing in on the truth. What's Mr. Hawes hiding? And what do those letters mean? Drop your guesses in the comments. I want to know what you're thinking. In chapter 4, we'll follow Miss Marple as she confronts the curate and uncovers a secret that changes everything. If you're hooked, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications for the next twist in Miss Marple and the Village Whisper murders. The afternoon sun struggles through the clouds over St. Mary Mead, casting a pale light on the church spire as Miss Jane Marple makes her way to the vicarage once more. Her knitting bag is tucked under her arm, but her thoughts are far from wool and needles. The village whisper is no longer just a chilling rumour, a thread woven with cryptic letters, a silver bird brooch, and late-night voices in the churchyard. Mr. Hawes, the nervous curate, is at the centre of her suspicions. Now, his hurried letter and skittish behaviour raising red flags. Miss Marple's steps are brisk but careful. She knows confronting Mr. Hawes will require all her tact to unravel what he's hiding. The village feels like it's holding its breath, waiting for the whisper's promised death to strike dot at the church. Miss Marple finds Mr. Hawes in the vestry, sorting hymnals with trembling hands. He's a thin man, barely 30, with a face that looks perpetually worried, as if life itself is a test he's failing. When he sees Miss Marple, he startles, dropping a hymnal with a thud. "Miss Marple, I didn't expect you," he stammers, his eyes darting to the door. She smiles, her voice soft as a grandmother's, and says she's just checking in, what with all the village talk about the whisper. "It's unsettling, isn't it, Mr. Hawes?" she says, watching his face. "All this talk of death. Have you heard anything unusual?" His Adam's apple bobs, and he mutters something about gossip being a sin. But Miss Marple notices his hands clench, knuckles white. She decides to nudge gently, like easing a knot from a skein of yarn. "I was at the post office," she says, casually, "and Miss Hartnell mentioned you'd sent a letter yesterday in quite a hurry. Nothing wrong, I hope." Mr. Hawes freezes, his eyes wide, and for a moment she thinks he might bolt. Instead, he sinks onto a pew, his shoulders slumping. "Oh, Miss Marple," he whispers, "I've done something terrible." Her heart quickens, but she keeps her face calm, settling beside him. "Tell me, dear," she says, her tone as soothing as a lullaby. "Whatever it is, it's better out than in." And so, with the church's stained glass windows casting coloured light across his face, Mr. Hawes begins to talk. He confesses to writing the letter Miss Hartnell saw, but not the one at the vicarage. His letter, he says, was to a friend in London, a desperate plea for help. "I've been getting notes," he admits, his voice barely audible. "Anonymous ones, slipped under the vestry door. They started a week ago, saying I'd pay for my scenes that I couldn't hide. I thought it was a prank at first, but then the whisper started, and I'm scared, Miss Marple." He pulls a crumpled note from his pocket, the same unfamiliar handwriting she's seen before. "You can't run from it before the week's out." Miss Marple's mind races. The note matches the scrap from the post office, linking Mr. Hawes to the village whisper. But why him? What sin could this nervous young curate have committed? Here's a tip for you sleuths. When someone's scared, they're either guilty or a target. Miss Marple knows Mr. Hawes is hiding something, but his fear feels genuine. She presses gently, asking about the notes. "Have you any idea who might send them?" she asks. Mr. Hawes hesitates, then says, I made a mistake years ago, before I came here. I was in London, working as a clerk. I got mixed up with some bad people, nothing criminal, I swear, but I saw things I shouldn't have. I thought I'd left it behind when I came to St. Mary Mead." His voice cracks. "But someone knows. Someone followed me here." Miss Marple's eyes narrow. A past in London, bad company, and now threatening notes. This is no village gossip. It's personal. She asks about the strangers at the market, mentioning the bird brooch. Mr. Hawes shakes his head, but his eyes flicker with recognition at the word brooch. He claims he knows nothing, but Miss Marple isn't convinced. She thanks him, promising to keep his confidence, and suggests he stay cautious. As she leaves the church, she notices a figure watching from the churchyard, a woman, too far to identify, but wearing a scarf that flutters in the wind. Could it be one of the whisperers? Miss Marple makes a mental note to check the churchyard later, remembering Tommy's story about angry voices at midnight. On her way home, she stops by the village green, where Mrs. Baker is sweeping her shop steps. Miss Marple, ever the conversationalist, mentions the whisper casually, watching for reactions. Mrs. Baker, usually chatty, goes quiet. "It's awful, Jane," she says. "I heard something odd myself last night near the church. Sounded like an argument, but I couldn't see who." Another clue, matching Tommy's story. Miss Marple thanks her and heads home, her mind spinning. The churchyard is becoming a focal point, voices notes, a mysterious woman, and Mr. Hawes's London past is a new thread, one that stretches beyond St. Mary Mead at her cottage. Miss Marple sits by the fire, her knitting untouched. She adds to her notebook. Hawes's notes, same handwriting as post office. London past, bad company, woman with scarf in churchyard. The village whisper is tightening its grip, and Mr. Hawes is either a victim or a player in this deadly game. She needs to know more about his past, but she also needs to find those whisperers. Her next move is to revisit the market, to see if anyone else saw the women with the bird brooch. But she need to be discreet. Mary Mead is watching, and the whisper is spreading. That's Chapter 4, Mystery Fans. The plot's thickening, with Mr. Hawes's confession and a shadowy figure in the churchyard, pulling Miss Marple deeper into the village whisper's web. Who's sending those notes, and what's lurking in Hawes's past? Drop your theories in the comments. I'm curious to see your detective skills. In Chapter 5, we'll follow Miss Marple back to the market, where a chance encounter with a stranger reveals a clue that shakes the village. If you're loving this, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications for the next twist in Miss Marple and the village whisper murders. The morning mist clings to St. Mary Mead like a secret, softening the edges of the village as Miss Jane Marple steps out toward the market square. Her knitting bag is slung over her shoulder, but her eyes are sharp, scanning the cobblestones for any hint of the mysterious whisperers. The village whisper has woven a web of fear with cryptic notes, a nervous curate, and late-night voices in the churchyard pointing to something sinister. Mr. Hawes's confession about his troubled London past and the woman with the scarf in the churchyard have only deepened the mystery. Today, Miss Marple's determined to track down more about the women with the bird brooch and the bustling market where the whisper began as the place to start. The village is on edge, and she knows time is running out before the whispers. Promised death becomes reality. The market square is alive with the usual Saturday hum, farmers hawking vegetables, children darting between stalls, and neighbors exchanging gossip over baskets of apples. But there's a tension beneath it all, a wariness in the glances, as if everyone's waiting for the other shoe to drop. Miss Marple weaves through the crowd, her grey hair tucked under a sensible hat, her smile disarming as she nods to familiar faces. She stops at Mrs. Green's fruit stall, where the whisper was first overheard, and strikes up a chat. "Good morning, Mrs. Green," she says brightly. "Quite a stir in the village with this whisper nonsense, isn't it? You were here when it started. Did you see those women Mrs. Price Ridley mentioned?" Mrs. Green, wiping her hands on her apron, frowns. I saw them, Jane. 2 women, scarves up to their chins. One had a silver bird brooch, caught my eye. They didn't buy anything, just stood whispering, then left quick when folks started staring. Miss Marple nods, her mind latching onto the bird brooch again. She asks if Mrs. Green noticed anything else, their voices, their manner. One sounded fancy, like she was from the city, Mrs. Green says. The other kept her head down, didn't say much. But I swear I've seen that brooch before, years ago, though I can't place where. This is newer local connection. To the brooch, Miss Marple thanks her and moves on, her eyes scanning the crowd for anything unusual. That's when she spots her, a woman at the edge of the market, near the baker's cart, wearing a dark scarf and a coat that's a touch too fine for St. Mary Mead, no brooch. But her posture tense, watchful, sets Miss Marple's instincts tingling. She approaches slowly, pretending to examine a basket of pears nearby. The woman's face is half hidden by her scarf, but her eyes dart around as if she's looking for someone. Miss Marple, ever the master of casual conversation, turns and says, "Lovely pears this week, aren't they? Are you new to St. Mary Mead?" The woman startles, her hand flying to her scarf. "Just visiting," she says, her voice clipped, with a hint of that posh accent Mrs. Price Ridley mentioned. Before Miss Marple can ask more, the woman hurries off, disappearing into the crowd. But not before Miss Marple notices a glint of silver at her collar, a pin. Not a brooch, but shaped like a feather, close enough to make her heart skip. Could this be one of the whisperers? Here's a tip for you mystery buffs. Sometimes a clue isn't what it seems, but it's still a thread worth pulling. Miss Marple knows the feather pin might not be the bird brooch, but it's too close to ignore. She jots it down in her mental notebook, along with the woman's posh accent and nervous demeanor. As she lingers by the baker's cart, she overhears 2 villagers whispering not about the village whisper, but about Mr. Hawes. Saw him at the church last night, pacing like a ghost, one says. He's been odd since that London business. Miss Marple's ears prick up. The market's proving to be a gold mine. But she needs more than whispers and glimpses to tie it all together. She decides to follow a hunch and heads to the village hall, where old records and notices are kept. If the bird brooch has a local connection, as Mrs. Green suggested, there might be a clue in the village's past, perhaps a long-forgotten event or visitor. The hall is quiet, its dusty shelves lined with ledgers and faded posters. Miss Marple, with permission from the caretaker, flips through old minutes from village meetings, her eyes scanning for anything unusual. She finds it in a record, a brief mention of a London woman who stayed in St. Mary Mead for a summer, described as elegant, with a silver bird brooch. The record notes she left abruptly after a dispute at the vicarage. No name, but it's a start. She'll be back, stirring trouble with the whisper. As Miss Marple leaves the hall, she spots young Tommy, the baker's boy, lingering nearby. He looks nervous, clutching a loaf of bread like a shield. "Tommy," she says gently, "you mentioned those voices in the churchyard. Did you hear anything specific?" He hesitates, then whispers, "I heard a woman's voice, Miss Marple. She said something about settling it once and for all. Sounded angry, like she meant business." Miss Marple's mind races. An angry woman, a posh accent, a bird brooch, and now a feather pinnet, all circling back to the church and the vicarage. She thanks Tommy, slipping him another peppermint, and heads home, her thoughts swirling like the mist over the village. At her cottage, Miss Marple sits by the fire, her knitting untouched. The stranger at the market, the feather pin, the old record, they're all pieces of a puzzle that's starting to take shape. The village whisper feels like a grudge, something personal, tied to the vicarage and Mr. Hawes's past. She adds to her notebook, stranger with feather pin, posh accent, bird brooch in old record, vicarage dispute, angry woman in churchyard. Her next move is clear. She needs to revisit the vicarage to see if that old dispute holds the key to the whisper. But she need to tread lightly, the village is watching, and the whisper's deadline is looming. That's chapter 5, mystery fans. The village whisper is closing in, and Miss Marple's found a trail leading back to the vicarage's past. Who was the woman with the feather pin, and what's the connection to that old dispute? Drop your guesses in the comments. I want to hear your theories. In chapter 6, we'll follow Miss Marple as she digs into the vicarage's secrets and uncovers a name that changes everything. If you're hooked, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications for the next twist in Miss Marple and the Village Whisper Murders. See you soon. The evening settles over St. Mary Mead like a heavy curtain, the village hushed under a sky streaked with crimson. Miss Jane Marple walks briskly toward the vicarage, her knitting bag a familiar weight at her side, but her mind is alight with the threads she's gathered, the stranger with the feather pin, the bird brooch from a decade-old village record, and the angry voices in the churchyard. The village whisper's promise of death feels closer now, its deadline looming as the week nears its end. The vicarage, with its cryptic letter and tense atmosphere, is at the heart of this mystery, and Miss Marple suspects an old dispute. In the village hall, Records holds the key. She's determined to uncover what secrets Leonard and Griselda Clement are keeping, but she need all her gentle cunning to do it. At the vicarage, the lights glow softly through the ivy windows, but the air feels strained, like a house bracing for a storm. Griselda answers the door, her smile forced, her eyes darting to the darkening garden behind Miss Marple. "Jane, twice in 1 week," she says, trying to sound cheerful. "What brings you back?" Miss Marple, ever the picture of harmless curiosity, mentions she's been thinking about the whisper, and wonders if the vicarage has heard anything new. Griselda ushers her into the parlour, where Leonard is polishing his glasses, his sermon notes scattered across the desk. The letter Miss Marple noticed before is gone, but she spots a faint ink stain on the blotter, a clue it was recently moved. She settles into a chair, her voice light as she steers the conversation to the past. "I was at the village hall today," Miss Marple says, sipping the tea Griselda offers. "I came across an old record about a visitor, a London woman who stayed here 10 years ago. There was some sort of disagreement here at the vicarage. Do you remember anything about it?" Leonard's hand pauses mid-polish, and Griselda's cup clinks against its saucer. For a moment, the room is silent, save for the crackle of the fire. "Oh, that was before our time," Leonard says quickly, but his voice is too tight, too practiced. Griselda nods, adding, "We've only been here 8 years. Jane must have been the old vicar." Miss Marple smiles, but her eyes are sharp. She knows a dodge when she sees one, and the Clements are hiding something. She decides to press a little harder, but gently, like easing a splinter from skin. "It's just odd, isn't it?" she says. "That old story mentioned a woman with a bird brooch, and now we've got these whisperers with a similar one. Almost feels like the past is stirring up trouble again." Griselda's face pales, and Leonard clears his throat, muttering about coincidence. But Miss Marple notices Griselda's fingers twisting her wedding ring, a nervous habit. She changes tack, asking about Mr. Hawes, the curate, and whether he's been himself lately. He's been a bit distracted, Leonard admits reluctantly. The whispers got everyone on edge. Miss Marple nods, filing away their reactions. But her eyes catch something new, a photograph on the mantel, half tucked behind a vase, showing a younger Leonard with a woman who's not Griselda. The woman's wearing a silver pinner bird. Here's a tip for you, detective fans. The smallest details can crack a case wide open. A nervous tick, a hidden photo, an ink stain, these are the breadcrumbs that lead to the truth. Miss Marple knows the photograph is a clue, but she doesn't mention it. Instead, she asks about the vicarage's visitors, wondering aloud if any strangers have stopped by. Griselda hesitates, then says, "Just parishioners, Jane. No one unusual." But her eyes flicker to the desk where the letter was. Miss Marple makes a mental note to get a closer look at that desk later, perhaps with Mary's help. For now, she thanks the Clements and rises to leave, promising to keep them posted on any village news as she steps outside. The night air is sharp, and she notices a figure lingering by the churchyard gate, too far to identify, but the shape of a scarf catches the moonlight. Her pulse quickens, remembering the woman with the feather pin at the market. She considers following, but the figure vanishes into the shadows. Instead, Miss Marple heads to the church where she knows Mr. Hawes often works late. The vestry is empty, but she finds a scrap of paper under a pew, overlooked in his nervous tidying. It's another note, in that same unfamiliar handwriting. "You can't hide forever. It ends soon." The words match the note Mr. Hawes showed her, confirming the whisper's threats are targeted. But at whom? Hawes, the vicarage, or both? Back at her cottage, Miss Marple sits by the fire, her knitting untouched as she pieces it together. The photograph, the bird pin, the old disputes, they point to a secret tied to the vicarage, maybe to Leonard himself. The notes suggest someone from the past, possibly the London woman, is back, stirring up trouble with the village whisper. And the churchyard keeps coming up voices. A shadowy figure, notes. She adds to her notebook, bird pin in photo, not Griselda. Old dispute, London woman. Another note under pew. Her next step is to talk to Mary, the maid, who might know more about the vicarage's secrets or that photograph. But she need to be careful. The whisper's deadline is tomorrow, and the village is running out of time. That's chapter 6, Mystery Fans. The village whisper is tightening its grip, and Miss Marple's closing in on a secret that ties the vicarage to a dangerous past. Who's the woman in the photograph? And why is the churchyard at the center of it all? Drop your theories in the comments. I'm dying to hear what you think. In chapter 7, we'll follow Miss Marple as she questions Mary and uncovers a revelation that brings the whisper's target into focus. If you're hooked, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications for the next twist in Miss Marple and the Village Whisper murders. The dawn breaks over St. Mary Mead with a pale, uneasy light, as if the village itself is wary of the day ahead. Miss Jane Marple sits at her kitchen table, a cup of tea cooling as she reviews her notebook. The village whispers deadline before. The week's outlooms today, and the air feels thick with impending trouble. The vicarage's secrets are piling up. A photograph with a bird pin, a decade-old dispute involving a London woman, and threatening notes targeting Mr. Hawes. The churchyard, with its midnight voices and shadowy figures, keeps tugging at her. Thoughts. Miss Marple knows young Mary, the vicarage maid, might hold the key to unlocking the truth, especially about that mysterious photograph. With her knitting bag packed and her mind sharp, she heads out to find Mary. Determined to pull the next thread in this deadly tapestry, Miss Marple finds Mary at the vicarage, polishing silver in the kitchen, her hands moving quickly, but her eyes red-rimmed, as if she's been crying. "Good morning, Mary dear," Miss Marple says, her voice warm and steady. "You look troubled. Is it this whisper business?" Mary jumps, nearly dropping a spoon, and glances toward the parlour door. "Oh, Miss Marple, it's awful," she whispers. "Everyone's so tense, and I heard something I shouldn't have." Miss Marple settles at the kitchen table, her calm presence coaxing Mary to sit. "Tell me, dear," she says. "Whatever it is, it's safe with me." Mary hesitates, then spills a story that makes Miss Marple's heart quicken. "Late last night," Mary says, "she was tidying the parlour when she overheard the Clements arguing. It was about a woman," Mary whispers, her voice barely audible. "Mr. Clement was saying, she can't come back now, not after all this time. Mrs. Clement was upset, saying, if she knows, it'll ruin us. I didn't catch a name, but they mentioned a letter and something about London." Miss Marple's mind races. This must tie to the photograph of Leonard with the woman wearing the bird pin. She asks Mary about the photograph on the mantel, describing it carefully. Mary's eyes widen. "That's old, Miss Marple. It's been there since I started working here, but Mrs. Clement never likes me touching it. I think it's from before they were married." Miss Marple nods, her thoughts spinning. A woman from Leonard's past, a bird pin, a London dispute. Could she be one of the whisperers, back to settle an old score? She asks Mary if she's seen anyone unusual around the vicarage, perhaps a woman with a scarf or a pin. Mary bites her lip, then says, "There was someone 2 nights ago in the garden. I saw her from the window, dark scarf, standing by the roses. I thought it was a villager, but she was gone when I looked again." Miss Marple's pulse quickens. The churchyard figure, the market stranger, now someone in the vicarage garden. The pieces are aligning, but the picture is still blurry. Here's a tip for you sleuths. When a secret's buried, it's often in plain sight, hidden by what people take for granted. That photograph, ignored on the mantel, is screaming to be noticed, and Miss Marple knows it. It's no coincidence. She asks Mary to keep an eye out for any more letters or visitors, promising to check in soon. As she leaves the vicarage, she takes a slow walk around the garden, her eyes scanning the rose bushes. There, caught on a thorn, is a tiny scrap of fabric dark, like a scarf. She tucks it into her bag, a small clue that might mean nothing or everything. Her next stop is the church, to see if Mr. Hawes has received any more notes, but she's also thinking about that photograph. She needs to know who that woman was. At the church, Mr. Hawes is nowhere to be found, but the vestry door is ajar. Miss Marple steps inside, her eyes catching a glint under the desk, a silver hairpin, delicate and shaped like a feather. Breath catches. It's too close to the feather pin from the market to be chance. She pockets it carefully, knowing it's another thread linking the whisperers to the church and vicarage. As she leaves, she spots Mrs. Price Ridley across the village green, waving her over. "Jane," the gossip calls. "I've remembered something about those market women. The one with the bird brooch," she dropped a handkerchief, with an E. I kept it, thinking it might be useful. Miss Marple's heart skips. A monogrammed handkerchief could be the break she needs. She follows Mrs. Price Ridley to her house, where the handkerchief is produced, fine linen square with a neatly embroidered E. It's a solid clue, but Miss Marple knows better than to jump to conclusions. She thanks Mrs. Price Ridley, promising to return the handkerchief, and heads home, her mind buzzing. The letter E, the bird pin, the feather hairpin, the scarf fragment, they're all pointing to a woman from Leonard's past, possibly named Elizabeth or Emma, with a grudge that's fueling the village whisper. But is she targeting Leonard, Mr. Hawes, or someone else? And what's her connection to the churchyard? At her cottage, Miss Marple sits by the fire, her notebook open. She adds, vicarage argument, woman from Leonard's past, photograph with bird pin, scarf in garden, feather hairpin in vestry, handkerchief with E. The whisper's deadline is tonight, and the village feels like a clock ticking down. Her next move is to find Mr. Hawes, to see if he knows anyone with the initial E from his London days. But she need to hurry, the whisper's promise of death is hours away, and Miss Marple fears the churchyard will be the stage for what comes next. That's Chapter 7, Mystery Fans. The village whisper's web is tightening, and Miss Marple closing in on a woman from the past with a deadly grudge, who's behind the monogram E. And will the whisper's deadline bring tragedy? Drop your guesses in the comments. I'm eager to see your detective work. In Chapter 8, we'll follow Miss Marple as she tracks down Mr. Hawes and uncovers a connection that puts the vicarage in danger. If you're hooked, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications for the next twist in Miss Marple and the Village Whisper Murders. See you soon. The late afternoon sky over St. Mary Mead is heavy with clouds, casting a gloom that mirrors the village's growing unease. Miss Jane Marple hurries along the cobblestone path toward the church, her knitting bag tucked under her arm, but her thoughts are far from domestic. The village whisper's deadline before the week's out is mere hours away, and the clues are piling up. A monogrammed handkerchief with an E, a feather hairpin, a scarf fragment, and a photograph tying a mysterious woman to the vicarage's past. Mr. Hawes, the nervous curate, is her next target, his London secrets and threatening notes making him a key piece of the puzzle. The churchyard, with its midnight voices and shadowy figures, looms in her mind as the likely stage for whatever the whisper foretells. Miss Marple's steps are steady, but her heart races. She must find Hawes before it's too late. The church is quiet when she arrives, its ancient stones seeming to hold their breath. The vestry door is locked, unusual for this time of day, but Miss Marple spots a flicker of movement through the stained glass window. She knocks softly, calling, "Mr. Hawes, it's Jane Marple. May I have a word?" After a long pause, the door creaks open, revealing Mr. Hawes, his face pale and eyes hollow, as if he hasn't slept. "Miss Marple," he says, his voice shaky, I'm rather busy." But she steps inside, her calm demeanor disarming. His nerves. "It won't take long, dear," she says, settling onto a chair. "I'm worried about you. Those notes you mentioned, have there been more?" His hands tremble, and he sinks onto a stool. Nodding, he pulls another note from his pocket, the same unfamiliar handwriting. "Tonight, you'll pay." Miss Marple's breath catches this as the third note, and its timing matches the whisper's deadline. "Mr. Hawes," she says gently, "you mentioned a mistake in London. Could it involve someone whose name starts with an E? Perhaps an Elizabeth or Emma?" His eyes widen, and for a moment she thinks he'll bolt. Instead, he buries his face in his hands. "Emma," he whispers, "Emma Langley. I thought she was gone, out of my life forever." Miss Marple leans forward, her voice steady but kind. "Tell me about Emma, Mr. Hawes. It might save you." Hawes's story spills out like a dam breaking. In London, before he became a curate, he worked as a clerk for a shady businessman. Emma Langley was the man's secretary, sharp and ambitious, with a silver bird brooch she always wore. Hawes saw her falsifying documents, skimming money, but he kept quiet, too scared to speak up. When the business collapsed, Emma vanished, and Hawes thought he was freed till he came to St. Mary Mead. And the notes started. "She knows I saw her," he says, his voice breaking. "She thinks I'll talk, but I won't. I just want to be left alone." Miss Marple's mind races. Emma Langley, with a bird brooch, tied to a London scandal, could she be the posh-voiced whisperer back to silence Hawes? Here's a tip for you mystery lovers. Fear can hide the truth, but it also reveals it. Hawes's terror confirms Emma's a real threat, and Miss Marple knows the churchyard is where it's all converging. She asks Hawes if Emma had any connection to the vicarage, thinking of the photograph with the bird pin. He shakes his head, but his eyes flicker with doubt. "I don't know," he admits. "But she was clever, manipulative. If she's here, she's planned this." Miss Marple presses him to stay in the village, where he's safer, and promises to help. As she leaves, she notices a fresh footprint in the vestry's dusty floor small, like a woman's, leading to the churchyard door. Outside, the churchyard is eerily still, the gravestones casting long shadows. Miss Marple follows the path to where Tommy heard voices, her eyes scanning for clues. Near an old yew tree, she finds a crushed cigarette. Its brand unfamiliar, something city-like, not sold in St. Mary Mead. She tucks it into her bag. Alongside the scarf fragment and hairpin, the churchyard feels like the heart of the mystery, a place where secrets meet under cover of night. As she heads back to the village, she spots Mrs. Baker closing her shop. "Jane," Mrs. Baker calls, "be careful. I saw a woman near the church just now, scarf over her face. Looked like she was waiting for someone." Miss Marple's pulse quickens. Emma, or her accomplice. At her cottage, Miss Marple sits by the fire, her notebook open. Emma Langley, with her bird brooch, fits the whisperer's profile. Posh accent, London past, a grudge against Hawes. The vicarage connection, through the photograph, an old Leonard might know her too. The notes, the churchyard voices, the scar fits, all pointing to a confrontation tonight. She adds to her notebook, Emma Langley, bird brooch, London scandal, footprint in vestry, cigarette in churchyard, woman. By church. Her next move is to warn the Clements and keep an eye on the churchyard after dark. But she need help, perhaps young Tommy, who's proven observant. The whisper's deadline is hours away, and Miss Marple fears Emma's plan is already in motion. That's Chapter 8, Mystery Fans. The village whispers, target is clear, and Miss Marple's racing against time to stop Emma Langley's deadly scheme. Is Hawes the only one in danger, or is the vicarage next? Drop your theories in the comments. I want to see your detective skills. In Chapter 9, we'll follow Miss Marple as she stakes out the churchyard and faces a chilling encounter that brings the whisper's truth to light. If you're hooked, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications for the next twist. In Miss Marple and the Village Whisper Murders. See you soon. Night falls over St. Mary Mead like a heavy cloak. The village swallowed by shadows as the clock ticks toward the village whispers deadly deadline. Miss Jane Marple stands at her cottage window, her knitting untouched, her eyes fixed on the distant church spire. The clues have woven a tight web. Emma Langley, a woman with a silver bird brooch and a London past, is likely behind the threatening notes targeting Mr. Hawes, the nervous curate. The vicarage's secret serve photograph, an old dispute, a monogrammed handkerchief point to a deeper connection, perhaps to Leonard Clement himself. The churchyard, with its midnight voices and scattered clues, is the stage for whatever Emma has planned. Miss Marple knows tonight is the night, and she's determined to stop a tragedy. Wrapping her shawl tightly, she slips out into the dark. Her heart steady, but her senses sharp. The village is silent as she makes her way to the churchyard. The only sound, the crunch of gravel under her sensible shoes. She's enlisted young Tommy, the baker's boy. To keep watch from a distance, his sharp eyes and quick feet could be vital. She's told him to stay hidden near the vicarage gate, to run for help if anything goes wrong. The churchyard is a maze of gravestones, their outlines blurred by mist, and Miss Marple moves carefully, her flashlight dim to avoid detection. She positions herself behind the old yew tree where she found the cigarette, her eyes scanning the darkness. The air is thick with tension, as if the whisper itself is watching. Then she hears it, a soft rustle, footsteps on grass, and low voices near the church door. Peering through the shadows, Miss Marple sees two figures, one a woman, her scarf glinting with a silver pin, a bird, unmistakable. The other is Mr. Hawes, his posture hunched, his voice pleading. "Emma, please," he whispers. "I never told anyone. I swear it." The woman, Emma Langley, Miss Marple, is certain, laughs, a cold, sharp sound. "You saw too much, Robert," she says, her posh accent cutting through the night. "And now you're here, in this perfect little village, playing the saint. But I know the truth." Miss Marple's heart races. Emma's voice drips with venom, and her hand moves to her pocket, where something glints, a knife, a gun. Miss Marple grips her flashlight, ready to act. But she needs to hear more. Emma's words confirm Hawes's story, a London scandal, falsified documents, a business collapse. But there's more. "You weren't the only one who saw," Emma hisses. "Leonard knew too, didn't he? That's why he ran to this village, hiding behind his sermons." Miss Marple's breath catches. Leonard Clement, tied to Emma's past. The photograph on the vicarage mantel flashes in her mind, the woman with the bird pin, standing with a younger Leonard. Was she Emma? The pieces are falling into place, but the danger is immediate. Hawes is trembling, backing toward the church, and Emma steps closer, her hand still in her pocket. Miss Marple knows she can't wait. She steps out from the yew tree, her voice calm but firm. "Good evening, Miss Langley. I think we need to talk." Emma spins, her face a mask of fury, the silver bird brooch catching the moonlight. "You," she snarls, recognizing Miss Marple's unassuming figure. "Meddling old woman." Hawes gasps, stumbling back, but Miss Marple holds her ground, her flashlight steady. "I know about London," she says, her tone even, "and I know you're here for revenge. But hurting Mr. Hawes won't erase the past." Emma laughs, but it's brittle, and her eyes dart to the churchyard gate. Miss Marple keeps talking, buying time, knowing Tommy is watching. "The vicarage knows something too, don't they? That photograph, Leonard and you, years ago. What happened, Emma? Why come back now? Here's a tip for you, Detective fans. Courage isn't always loud, it's in the quiet moments, standing firm when danger looms. Miss Marple's no hero with a badge, but her steady voice is a weapon, keeping Emma off balance. Emma's hand wavers, the glint in her pocket now clearly. A small knife. Leonard betrayed me, she spits. He promised to help, then left me to take the fall. And Robert here, he saw it all and said nothing. They both owe me. Miss Marple nods, piecing it together. A love affair, perhaps, or a partnership. Gone sour, tying Leonard and Hawes to Emma's ruin. But before she can ask more, footsteps crunch behind her to me, running from the gate, shouting, "Miss Marple, the police are coming." Emma panics, her knife flashing as she lunges toward Hawes. Miss Marple swings her flashlight, catching Emma's arm, and Hawes scrambles into the church. The commotion draws eyes lights flicker in nearby cottages, and a siren wails in the distance, thanks to Tommy's quick thinking. Emma hesitates, then bolts into the churchyard, disappearing into the mist. Miss Marple doesn't pursue, she's no match for a chase, but she knows Emma's trapped in St. Mary Mead, her plan unraveling. She helps Hawes to his feet, his face ashen but alive. "Thank you," he whispers, tears in his eyes. Miss Marple pats his arm, her mind already on the vicarage, where Leonard's secrets await at her cottage. Miss Marple sits by the fire, her notebook open. The churchyard confrontation has confirmed Emma Langley as the whisperer, her bird brooch and grudge tying her to Hawes and Leonard. The photograph, the notes, the voices all point to a betrayal from years ago. She adds to her notebook, Emma Langley, bird, brooch, knife. Leonard's betrayal, London past, churchyard confrontation. The police will search for Emma, but Miss Marple knows the final answers lie with Leonard. She must confront him before Emma strikes again. The whisper's deadline has passed, but the danger hasn't. That's Chapter 9, Mystery Fans. The village. Whisper's truth is out, but Emma's still on the loose, and Leonard's secrets could be next. Will Miss Marple stop her in time? Drop your guesses in the comments. I'm dying to hear your theories. In Chapter 10, we'll follow Miss Marple to the vicarage for a final showdown that unveils the heart of the village whisper. If you're hooked, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications for the thrilling conclusion of Miss Marple and the village whisper murders. See you soon. The first light of dawn creeps over St. Mary Mead, painting the village in soft pinks and greys, but the air is heavy with the aftermath of last night's chaos. Miss Jane Marple sits by her cottage window, her knitting untouched, her notebook open to a page filled with clues. Emma Langley's bird brooch, threatening notes, a photograph tying her to Leonard Clement, and a churchyard confrontation that nearly ended in bloodshed. The village whisper's deadline has passed, but Emma, the vengeful whisperer, escaped into the mist, her knife gleaming with intent. Miss Marple knows the danger isn't over. Emma's grudge against Leonard and Mr. Hawes runs deep, rooted in a London betrayal years ago. With the police searching the village, Miss Marple heads to the vicarage, determined to confront Leonard and unravel the final threads of this deadly mystery before Emma strikes again. The vicarage looms under the morning sky, its ivy-clad walls hiding secrets that have festered too long. Miss Marple knocks, and Griselda opens the door, her face pale, her eyes shadowed with worry. "Jane, thank goodness," she says, her voice trembling. "The police were here about last night. What's happening?" Miss Marple steps inside, her calm presence a steadying force. Leonard is in the parlour, pacing, his sermon notes forgotten on the desk. The photograph with the bird-pinned woman is gone from the mantel. But Miss Marple's not surprised. She suspects Leonard hid it. After her last visit, "Leonard," she says gently, "we need to talk about Emma Langley. She's here, in St. Mary Mead, and she's dangerous. You know why?" Leonard freezes, his hands clenching, and Griselda gasps, her eyes darting to her husband. Miss Marple settles into a chair, her voice firm but kind. "I saw the photograph, Leonard. You and a woman with a bird brooch from years ago. It's Emma, isn't it? And the notes, the whispers, they're about a betrayal in London." Leonard sinks onto the sofa, his face ashen. "How did you know?" he whispers. Miss Marple doesn't answer, just waits, knowing silence draws out truth. Finally, he speaks, his voice low. "Emma was my fiancée before Griselda. In London, we worked for a man named Carver, a crook who hid his crimes behind a shipping business. Emma forged documents for him and I helped to protect her. Hawes was there too, a clerk who saw it all. The story unravels. When Carver's schemes collapsed, Emma took the blame, believing Leonard would stand by her. Instead, he fled to St. Mary Mead, starting fresh as a vicar, leaving her to face ruin alone. Hawes, guilt-ridden but silent, followed. Later, seeking redemption in the church. "She thinks we betrayed her," Leonard says, his voice breaking. "I thought she'd moved on, but then the note started, and the whisper." Griselda, tears in her eyes, grips his hand. "Why? Didn't you tell me?" she asks. Miss Marple's heart aches for them, but her mind is on Emma. "She's here now," she says. "Last night, she tried to harm Mr. Hawes. You're next, Leonard, unless we stop her. Here's a tip for you mystery fans. The past never stays buried, it festers, waiting for a spark to ignite it. Miss Marple knows Emma's pain has twisted into vengeance, and the vicarage is her final target. She asks Leonard about the letter she saw on his desk, the one with the unfamiliar handwriting. He hesitates, then pulls it from a drawer, a note, like Hawes's, saying, "Tonight it ends." It's Emma's handwriting, a match for the others. Miss Marple's mind races, Emma's circling, likely hiding nearby. She suggests calling the police, but before Leonard can agree, a crash echoes from the garden. Griselda screams, and Miss Marple moves to the window, her eyes sharp. There, by the rose bushes, is Emma, her scarf loose, her bird brooch glinting, a knife in her hand. "Stay." "Here," Miss Marple says, her voice steady despite the danger. She steps outside, her flashlight in hand, knowing the police are too far to help yet. "Emma," she calls, her tone calm but firm. "This isn't the way. Hurting them won't undo the past." Emma turns, her face a mask of rage and pain, the knife trembling in her grip. "They ruined me," she hisses. "Leonard promised love, then left me to rot. Hawes saw it all and did nothing. They don't get to live happily while I suffer." Miss Marple steps closer, her eyes locked. "On Emma's, I understand your pain," she says softly. "But this village, these people, they're not your enemies. Let me help you." For a moment, Emma wavers, her knife lowering, but then footsteps crunch behind Tommy, running from the gate. Shouting for the police, Emma panics, raising the knife, but Miss Marple, quick as a cat, swings her flashlight, knocking it from her hand. Leonard rushes out, pinning Emma's arms as she struggles, her cries echoing through the garden. The police arrive, alerted by Tommy's earlier call, and take Emma into custody, her bird brooch glinting as they lead her away. Miss Marple watches, her heart heavy but relieved. The village whisper is silenced, its threat ended, but the scars it left on St. Mary Mead will linger. Back in the parlour, Leonard and Griselda cling to each other, their secrets laid bare. Hawes arrives, shaken but safe, thanking Miss Marple with tears in his eyes. At her cottage. Miss Marple sits by the fire, her notebook closed. She adds one. Final entry: Emma Langley arrested. Leonard and Hawes' betrayal revealed. Village safe. The whisper was a cry for justice, twisted by pain. But Miss Marple's quiet observation, her knack for seeing the human heart, stopped a tragedy. St. Mary Mead will heal, its gossip turning to this tale for years to come. She picks up her knitting, the needles clicking softly, and smiles. Another puzzle solved, another village saved. That's the end of Miss Marple and the Village Whisper murders, mystery fans. Emma's reign of terror is over, but what did you think of her motive? Was justice served, or was she a victim too? Drop your thoughts in the comments, I'm dying to hear them. If you loved this journey, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more mysteries with Miss Marple. Share this video with your fellow sleuths, and let me know what case you want solved next. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next adventure.